Okay, and we're recording.
Okay.
So, welcome Camila to the Ethereum community series. For people that are checking in and that don't know anything about the community series, it's a series where I have the pleasure to interview people or talk to people who are contributing to the Ethereum community. People have posted and upvoted questions, and Camila and I will go over them today, and we'll dive a little bit deeper in what she's been up to. We'll certainly talk about the book that I saw she finished, or at that of which she finished the first draft. And I'd say let's just get into it. Welcome, and thank you for doing this, Camila.
Great. Thank you so much for having me.
So let's most people pose the questions related to Ethereum, of course, but I would like to start a little bit earlier. You are a former Bloomberg writer. Can you tell a little bit about where you're from and how you end up with Bloomberg?
Sure. So I'm Chilean from Santiago. I studied journalism there. I worked at the national, like one of the biggest national newspapers for a little bit, but then kind of got bored of being in my smaller city, and applied to come work in, or actually to come study in the United States, and got accepted at Northwestern in Chicago. So did my master's in journalism there, and that's where I became interested in business journalism for the first time. I got into journalism because I like writing. I never thought I'd like anything like numbers or finance related. But at Northwestern, I was like, I should just try and see, learn something I know nothing about. So I took this business journalism class and thought it was really interesting, to see how really money kind of moves the world, basically. And I thought it was my chance to write for people who are making like actual decisions, and have like real stake, like have a real interest in what I'm writing about. They'll, it's people who actually make money off of my story. So I thought that was
Mm.
really exciting. um, so I applied to the Bloomberg internship in New York. um, got in, got hired after the internship, and stayed in New York for about 6 months. And after that, they sent me to Argentina. Um, yeah, and then I asked to get transferred to Madrid, and then came back to New York. And that was 8 years of reporting for Bloomberg.
Mm. So there's a lot to unpack there,
Yeah.
because before we dive in deeper into Ethereum, I'm very interested in everything you've done up until this point. So I'll just read this from your website. In your biography, you write, "I'm a financial journalist with experience across continents and asset classes. My focus has been on the crazier slash more volatile corners of the market." Which ties in with your experience in Argentina. But you mentioned you knew you wanted to write, or you loved writing, and then you were accepted to the journalism course. Like, when did you actually know you were going to write about finance?
Yeah, like I mentioned, it was at Northwestern when I was doing my master's degree. There was, the choice to take different concentrations for the reporting class. There was a politics concentration, a business concentration, a science one, and I think like an arts one. And I had been writing about international like politics back in Chile in the newspaper I had worked at. So I was like, I already know how to write about politics. And I thought like it'd be easier for me to learn about like writing about arts and like science. I thought, that's just like a more niche part of journalism. But I thought business, like learning about business and financial journalism was like a, a more interesting opportunity for me to pursue. So I thought, I'll take this concentration and just learn about this, side of reporting and of the world that I had, you know, I had no idea about until that moment.
You gave an interview. You talked with Anthony Pompliano the other week, and there you mentioned about the excitement of the Argentinian market, at least compared to Madrid and European stocks. But I was
Yeah.
wondering, you're Chilean, so I don't know Chile that well, but are there any issues of the size of, not probably not the size of Argentina, but maybe even something that we're seeing in Brazil or something? Or is Chile one of those stable countries in South America? What was your experience there growing up?
Yeah. No, so Chile is very different from Argentina and Brazil in that it's a pretty stable country. We don't have currency controls or much inflation. There are some corruption issues, but they're really small compared to what you see in Brazil and Argentina. The country does get like really scandalized out of like politics stealing $20,000, and and it's good, like I'm glad that's happening, that people are like outraged. But after I was in Argentina covering like all this craziness and went back to Chile and people were like talking about these corruption issues, I'm like, this is peanuts, like you have nothing
Mm,
to about. So I think that allowed me to really appreciate how crazy things were in Argentina when I got there, because I didn't have that experience growing up. Like Chile is just like a very, it works well, it's very stable, it plays by the book, and that's totally different from what I saw in Argentina, obviously.
I spent quite some time in Brazil. I was there as a 18-year-old exchange student, and I remember they said Chile is like the most, like, from a stability point of view, is the most European country you'll find
Yeah,
in Southern America, or even Central and Latin America including.
yeah, for sure.
So you go to the United States to study journalism, then you get accepted through the internship at Bloomberg, and then they send you to Argentina. I was I was wondering, how old were you when you were sent to Buenos Aires?
I was 24, I think.
Hmm.
Yeah.
And so what is it like to be a 24-year-old reporter who has an interest in finance and who gets sent to Buenos Aires?
Well, okay, so on the professional side, it was great. Like, I obviously was a little bit bummed when they sent me to Argentina, because my dream had been to go work in New York. So I was there at Bloomberg in New York, and I'm like, okay, I made it. And then they were like, actually, we want you to go to Argentina, and I was like, I don't want to go back to South America. I'm from there. But then, when I got there and saw everything that was going on, it was actually the best way to start my journalism career, because it was like a crash course of all the like border and crazy examples that can happen in government and finance. It was a really good training, like financial training. I covered currency controls, inflation, fiscal deficit. Um, there was obviously a default, like a debt default, um, like takeovers of foreign companies. The government took over a YPF, which was owned by a Spanish like oil company. So like all these like huge issues were happening around me, and I was like in the middle of it, covering it for this major news agency. So it was a great experience. On the personal level, being a 20 something year old in Argentina, in Buenos Aires, I really recommend it. I had the best time. I made such good friends. Argentines are really social, like gregarious people. They love going out. You party until the early hours of the day, and I was alone there with no real close family, and my friends there became my family. So it was a great experience on a personal and professional level.
And how long did you stay in Argentina? Was it 4 years?
Yep, a little bit over four
Yeah.
years.
And was it during that period that you got to that you learned about cryptocurrency or I guess Bitcoin back then? That was during your period in Argentina.
Yeah, that's right. 2013 was the first story I wrote about Bitcoin. There, an Argentine colleague, but he wasn't working in Argentina at the time. He heard through some of his friends that there was this Bitcoin meetup in Buenos Aires, and he told me, "Hey, like this sounds like really interesting and weird." I had never heard about Bitcoin at that point, I think. And so he sent me the link. I said, hey, and told me maybe I should check it out. And so I started researching about kind of the Bitcoin scene in Argentina, and it was actually pretty booming at that time. People were really, actually using Bitcoin for what it's supposed to be used as, which is like a store of value, a protection against inflation, about government interference. Um, so yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
that
You could say that something that loses 80% of its value in a year is not a store of value, but
right.
compared to what that depends on your frame of reference, right?
For sure. Yeah. I mean, if you got into Bitcoin in 2013, like the people I was talking to back then did, then you did pretty well. But yeah, if you bought at, I don't know, end of 2017, then not so much. It totally depends on when you get in and your frame of reference. But for people in countries like Argentina or Venezuela, where the only direction of the currency is down versus the dollar, it's a pretty, it's a safer bet even than Bitcoin, because Bitcoin is volatile, it goes up and down. But the Argentine peso is always going to go down. So, it's worth taking the chance.
Were you being paid in Argentine peso as well, or in dollars?
Yeah. Yeah, so that's the thing. So when I got to Argentina, it was the end of Cristina Fernandez's first term, and currency controls weren't as strict back then. So as soon as I got to the office, like one of the first things my colleagues told me was, when you get your salary, you need to exchange to dollars right away. So I got my salaries in pesos. I had a like peso account and a dollar account at my Citibank account, and it was really easy. Like I just like exchanged it on like the online website, and that was it. And then one day when Christina got reelected, it was, I think, on the first week that she imposed the new currency control, which was that you are just not allowed to buy dollars. And that was it. Like,
So from one day to the other, it's like you're done buying US dollars.
yeah, I was like in the Bloomberg office in Buenos Aires reporting this as it happened. Like okay, an announcement on TV. Christine is saying people aren't allowed to buy dollars anymore. I was like sending headlines, like writing the story, and then I'm like, okay, is this actually like happening? So I went to my account in Citibank, and like the option to buy dollars was just not there anymore. Like, and I think I still had like, I don't know, some pesos left, and I just like couldn't buy any dollars, and it was just like that, like from one minute to the other.
Did you also start using Bitcoin around that period, or did your usage of Bitcoin came much later?
No, it was around, I think it was that same year that I wrote about it. I'd have to check, even either that same year or 1 year later, but like pretty soon after that happened, that people in Argentina started using Bitcoin because it was crazy. Like you had earnings in pesos, and you couldn't do anything. Like you couldn't buy dollars. You could buy dollars in the black market at a super like much higher exchange rate, and it was a pain to get. You had to like physically go to the street to they were called cuevas, like caves, and they were like little shops, like people who hid like on the back of a store and exchange dollars at like twice the official rate. And you had to like physically go with like a bag of pesos, like get the dollars. It was a real pain. So Bitcoin was a good option. um yeah. Yeah, but because you're not really allowed trade or hold the assets that you're reporting on. I didn't actually buy Bitcoin at the time.
Okay.
So, but
Okay.
I was reporting on people who were.
Yeah, I was wondering about that because there's this podcast as well from Laura Shin, the Unchained and Unconfirmed podcast, and she, in her Twitter bio, writes that she is a no coiner, that she doesn't hold any coins. Which on the one hand, I wonder, is that a just professional etiquette, or is that just I don't know. But in your case, you weren't specifically disallowed to hold anything you were reporting on, or was it just like professional? Like, was that what you thought was right to do?
I thought it was right to do that. I mean, when you're reporting, I mean, you there's like all these guidelines that you read like every year, and you like click accept on like the terms, and it says like really clearly if you're reporting on something, you're not supposed to hold whatever you're reporting on. So I don't know, like an Apple reporter can hold Apple stock,
Hmm.
and it makes sense. Like it keeps you unbiased. I do hold. I still don't hold like a substantial amount of crypto. I bought a little bit just to like test it and like see how things actually work. So I think for a journalist, it helps to like buy crypto as like a research experiment, like to see how things actually work. But I agree with the Bloomberg policy of not holding what you're reporting on. I mean, if you stand to gain from like more positive coverage of
Hmm.
Bitcoin, then you shouldn't. Yeah.
Well, at least you're an independent writer right now, or so I read on your profile, so that gives you some flexibility. I was
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, go ahead if you I don't know if I cut you off.
No. It's right. That's right. I'm an independent writer, so maybe like my views will change. But for now, like I said, I think it's a good policy to
Hmm.
have.
Sure. I was wondering, so you're in Argentina. You're writing about all these, I would say, exciting things, at least
Mhm.
from your perspective as a reporter, whatever is going down in Argentina. And then somebody tells you about Bitcoin or takes you to this meetup. Like, did you have a specific aha moment where you actually, like, when things clicked in your mind when you heard about this Bitcoin thing and how what it could be capable of, specifically given in that Argentinian context, like you're reporting on everything that's happening and how currency controls are being put in place and all those kind of things, and then you learn from Bitcoin or about Bitcoin. And is there like a specific moment where you're like, oh, wait a moment, this is probably much more interesting than I first thought?
Yeah, I don't know if there was one specific moment, but I just remember hearing about this and starting to research it. And in the beginning, it felt like, very foreign. Like, what's this like weird, like fake money? But then, I started, because in the beginning it just felt like some like internet coin that was just like, you know, it, I was confused. It was like, is this a company that's handing out like fake coins? Like, how do I buy this? What if the company goes bankrupt? Like, what happens to your money? But then obviously I started researching more. I started talking to people in like the Bitcoin community there. Um, and I don't remember. I remember I spoke with like the owner of an exchange there. I don't remember exactly who, but yeah. So I started doing more research and talking to people, and they explained to me, no, like this is actual currency backed by software, by this like algorithm and miners that are holding the network together. It's like a decentralized network of like people behind computers, and it's backed by like complicated math, and like it was more complicated than I thought, but made me realize that okay, this is actually like a technological breakthrough. Like it's not like some weird like internet money. It's actually, like a new kind of financial system that's emerging. And that to me was really exciting. And in the context of Argentina and me, having my own personal savings affected by the government, I really understood the value of something like this. It's like an independent financial system that doesn't need the central bank, doesn't need any bank for like making transfers or anything. No government can stop it. And at the same time, I was being stopped from doing what I wanted to do with my own money. So seeing those two things together, I got, this is an actual interesting thing, not just some fad that will go away.
You, oh, wait a moment. Yeah, we lost connection. I'm sorry. I don't know if it happened on my side or your side, but
Yeah, it just like shut down.
yeah, no. So you were talking about discovering Bitcoin, and I was curious because you told the story, or you told a part of the story to Anthony as well, of you reporting or you going to your colleagues and sharing this article or whatever first report or first series of reports that you were writing on Bitcoin, and people didn't really react positively to it,
No.
if I understood it correctly.
Well, I mean, it's not that they didn't react positively. It's just that very few people, at least in Bloomberg or like in the people I was talking with at Bloomberg, had heard about this. And so I remember pitching this story. Whenever we wrote like big features, we got on a morning call with editors in different parts of the organization, like in New York and Mexico and like Brazil. And the reporters pitched the stories that they wanted to write, and my turn came up, and I started explaining the story I wanted to write about. Hey, like Argentines are using Bitcoin, this digital currency, to protect against surging inflation and currency controls. And yeah, my editors were like, Bitcoin, like what's that? Like that's a scam. It's a Ponzi scheme. Like why are we going to be writing about this? Um, but in the end, like I convinced them that it was a real thing, and the story did really well. So they were like, okay, fine. Like I was like, I told you so. And then yeah, and then like later on, when I continued to report on Bitcoin in New York, I got kind of the same type of responses, even though it was obvious, Bitcoin wasn't a fad. I mean, it's been around for a decade almost, or yeah, a decade now. But yeah, and but yeah, people in the traditional finance world are really skeptical. I think it's hard not to be when it's a little bit threatening. It's like this new thing is going directly against what you've known to be the truth for all your life. So I'm being there like, hey, like I want to write about Bitcoin and Ethereum and like all these cryptos, and it's money based off like technology, and all these like older, mostly, men, or it doesn't matter, but they're like older and just like more used to the traditional financial world. It's harder for them to get it, especially if they've been based in the U.S. their whole lives with no problem doing whatever they want with their money. It was harder for them to understand the value of
I,
Bitcoin crypto.
I can imagine being at Bloomberg or any financial newspaper or website even, and those older people, they're like, whoa, we finally survived this whole internet thing. So we lost a lot of our subscribers, and we lost a lot of attention to this new internet thing. And now you're here telling us that the core business that we actually write about, which is money and financial markets in the broader context, is like there's something else here, and there's something else that's going to disturb everything, or disturb our thinking in a way that we can't really comprehend. It must be funny to be a 24 or 25-year-old walking in there, or calling in and say like, look, there's this Bitcoin thing. Let's see let's write about it. And I can
Yeah.
would be
It's, I
fun.
mean, I understand how they got their guard up, you know?
Yeah,
It was like
definitely.
very new.
Like here's this millennial telling us again
Yeah.
that things are going to change. So you get back to New York, and then you finally have your dream job at Bloomberg. Is that right? Were you living the dream?
Yeah, I think I already felt I was living the dream in Argentina. Like I said, I was having so much fun. But it was great to be, at the Bloomberg headquarters in New York. It felt like very exciting. The Bloomberg office in Argentina is pretty small. It's like, I think it was like maybe a 12-person team, with like sales and everyone included. And New York is like hundreds of people. And it's like everything's moving and everything's like shiny, and there's like free food, and it's just like, and like in the middle of Manhattan. So it was really exciting.
And so when did the idea, so we've been talking about crypto and Bitcoin, but where does Ethereum enter the picture? Because we'll talk about the book that you're writing, or that you just finished the first draft of. But where does Ethereum enter the picture? Were you writing on Ethereum, or how did that happen?
Yeah. So when I got back to New York, this was early 2017. I was writing for Bloomberg's Markets Live blog, which is a blog that's live commentary on macro markets. And bloggers are allowed to write about whatever seems interesting.
Wait, what's a micro market?
Macro markets are like, like foreign currencies, bonds, stocks, uh, things that are, that affect like global markets.
Okay, so they're not like micro markets, like small markets, but just
No,
specific.
macro.
Oh, Oh, sorry. I understood micro market. So I was wondering.
No,
Okay, okay, sure. Okay, I'm in. Sorry.
yeah, so I was writing about that, and my focus was emerging markets. So I mostly wrote about emerging markets. But then I started seeing, Bitcoin was, in like rising again, and there was this new thing called ICOs, and there was talk of the Bitcoin ETF back then in early 2017. So I started writing about that for the blog, and news about crypto started getting more and more attention. And that's when my editor, at Bloomberg, told me that they actually needed more coverage for regular Bloomberg news, not just for the blog. So I started writing about crypto for Bloomberg, for the Newswire, and then doing that as a side job, and then like still writing for the blog. And yeah, like covering the crypto space from a markets perspective, ICOs were really interesting. So I started writing a lot about that. And by the end of 2017, I had become, like one of the few journalists in like a major financial news organization that was writing about crypto. And I just thought, what was going on was so interesting, because it was not just Bitcoin anymore, but there were thousands of new coins springing up. Like they were raising hundreds of millions of dollars per second. They were like truly disrupting venture capital. It really did feel like a revolution inside tech and finance. And so, you know, and this was being enabled by Ethereum, basically. So at the end of 2017, I had amassed this like huge amount of like knowledge about crypto. Suddenly, I had like grown my network. um, through reporting the space. And I thought, it's the right time for me to finally write a book. Like I had always wanted to do that. Like I totally got into journalism because I like to write. And I had never felt like I kind of owned a topic enough to write about it. Like in Argentina, I loved it, and yeah, I was like in the middle of it, but there were also like veteran Argentine journalists who had been covering this space for much longer.
Mm.
In crypto, everything was new, and it feels like an inclusive community where it doesn't matter if you just got there. Like you can have an opinion, and people will listen to you, and it's just like you can have access to like the top people in the space because it's so new. So I thought, okay, maybe it's my chance. And then there's a story to be told here, like what just happened in when everything blew up in 2017. I thought, it's a story. It needs to be documented more permanently than with my stories. And so I started thinking about what was the best story to tell. And so Bitcoin is obviously the biggest story, I think, in crypto. It's the biggest cryptocurrency, the first one. But then I thought Ethereum really brought the space forward after Bitcoin. Like Bitcoin made exchanging money easier, but Ethereum allowed something else. Like it allowed programmable money, it allowed smart contracts. So it felt like it went a step beyond Bitcoin. And with the space exploding with ICOs in 2017, that was like an extra layer of of I don't know how to say it. That was like even more interesting,
Yeah.
because it was the technology that allowed this, but it had also spurred this new wave of tokens and innovation.
Yeah, all of a sudden you don't have to go to Kickstarter to raise money. It's like, oh, wait a moment, there's actually a way to raise money where nobody tells us what to do or how to think about Kickstarter or how to think about raising money. It's like we don't have to go through the traditional or the classic path. It's like, oh no, there's ICOs and we can raise money that way.
Yeah, and I know, I mean, they've become a bad word, and they're basically gone now, but it was still, it was a really interesting use case for crypto. Maybe they'll evolve into something different, and we'll see a new type of crowdfunding based on Ethereum or another blockchain. But ICOs in 2017 did feel like they were actually changing something, and it was like a fully blockchain based phenomenon. I thought it was worth looking into more closely. And yeah, so Ethereum was the second biggest crypto. It had like really fueled this huge bubble that we saw. It brought the blockchain space forward with the smart contracts. And the story of how it was created and the people behind it and how it came to be hasn't really been told very well or at all. So I thought, this is the story I should tell.
So yeah, so that was what I was wondering about. Like, if you started writing the book, or if you thought about writing a book, sorry, back in 2017 when the ICO bubble, or when the ICO usage really exploded, the goal was not to write about ICO specifically. The goal was to document the history of Ethereum and then how it grew into whatever it will grow into, and ICOs are just one part of that. And I'd say, for example, DeFi or decentralized finance is a much bigger thing in 2019 than it was in 2017, obviously. So if I understand it correctly, you try to, or you are actually writing the history of Ethereum, going deeper into the characters that actually, I guess, sat there in their apartment in Brooklyn whenever they decided to come together. Or where I remember reading some post, maybe in Bloomberg, on the early history, but there is, as you said, no definitive book or extended resource on how that actually all went down, and how those characters actually compare to each other, and how you mentioned this in the talk with Anthony, how Vitalik was often put in a position, or found himself in a position where he had to choose either between his comrades or his co-contributors and Ethereum, the project itself. So it's basically, so you're writing this book to write the history of Ethereum before time passes and details get lost.
Exactly. Yeah. The story really hasn't been told, like I said, and it's such an interesting story of different people coming together, putting their differences aside initially to work and to create this revolutionary blockchain platform that will allow developers to do things that they were never able to before, and that's super interesting. And then how the differences between the co-founders in the end, they in the end they couldn't really put them aside, and what happened after that. So yeah, it focuses on the history of Ethereum itself, and then how it developed from the very early days through like the bubble, and then until the present, where DeFi seems like, okay, there's like an actual like a more permanent use case than ICOs. But I don't I think that most of the book is spent in the very very early days, because I want it to be evergreen, and not be outdated very very fast. So yeah, that's most of the book is on the early days, but I do get into how the first killer use case was ICOs, and now it's looking more like there will be a second killer use case, which is DeFi.
Mm-hmm. How do you actually go about writing a book? So you work as a reporter, which obviously is very different from writing a book. So how do you actually, well, first, how do you get the book out there? I saw that you wrote that you have a deal with HarperCollins, and
Yeah.
so can you talk a little bit about the process of writing that book?
Sure. Yeah, it was pretty overwhelming. Like, I had never done it before, so I was just like, okay, I'm gonna learn how to write a book. And first thing was just getting the idea. So, like I said, it was like deciding Ethereum was the most important and interesting story to tell in the crypto space. I sat down with an author, who was a journalist and who had also written his first book, and he like gave me like some tips and put me in touch with his agent. So I emailed his agent and said, hey, I'm thinking about writing a book on crypto, and met with this agent, and he was like, okay, yeah, let's work together. And I told him my idea, and he kind of guided me through the process of writing a book proposal, which is basically writing a business plan where you have to say why you want to write this book, why like you should be the one to write it, like a sample chapter, like a whole outline of the book with like a brief summary of each chapter. So it's like a pretty detailed proposal. And I don't know, I think I took like a month or so in that process, and then after that was done, he sent it to a group of like 10 different publishers, and HarperCollins was one of the first to get back with an offer. And yeah, it was really exciting. I couldn't believe like I already had an offer from like one of the biggest publishers out there. um, and yeah, my agent was like, this is a great offer, you should take it right away. And so I have no idea, how this works. So I was like, okay, I trusted him, and went with HarperCollins, and it was a great decision. Like, I met with my editor. She's like the head of Harper Business, like the business section of HarperCollins. And she's been great. Like, she's been there forever. She has like tons of experience, and she's been super helpful, like guiding me through it. And yeah, and after that, like we talked about the outline in more detail. Like, she gave me some feedback. I made some changes, and then I just started reporting. Like, I spent, I think, maybe the first 6 months of 2018, just doing tons of reporting. I spoke with all of the initial co-founders. There's a little bit of, controversy around that term. People say they're not really co-founders, or like that shouldn't be the term. It's like these 8 people who are considered by some to be like the initial co-founders. Spoke with all of them and started like broadening out the circle from those 8 from those 8. So yeah, after I had, I think, what I felt was like a pretty good base of the story from tons of interviews, then I started actually writing it. I was writing some like during my reporting time, like whenever I had like a good interview, I wrote down kind of the stories they told me. So I had some pieces of the book already while I was doing that initial reporting. But then after, I think around August or like July 2018 is when I started like writing the book from like, okay, page 1, and putting all the pieces together.
So that's about a year ago, and you plan on finishing it next year, or sorry, you plan on the book coming out next year around Blockchain Week.
Yeah, that's right. It's a really long process. So I just turned in my very first draft, which
Congratulations.
Thanks so much. No, that was a huge milestone. I'm like so relieved to have like a first draft to at least like start working on. So it's far from done. Like I know there's a lot of improvement to do, but yeah, it's great to have like the full story laid out. And yeah, from now it'll be a lot of editing. Like I'm meeting my editor next week, and she already has some feedback on what I showed her, and I think it'll be just a lot of back and forth. Like I've already been through this with just writing articles, and I can only imagine like if that's like a long process with a long article of like tons of like back and forth with editors, I think it's gonna be really tough, or like long process with a book. But I really trust her. Like from the tips that she's given me so far, they've been really smart. So yeah, I think she'll help me get the book in like the best shape possible.
Yeah, there are some user questions that I can finally get to, because we're getting to the Ethereum part. There was Chess Smith who asked, now that you're an independent writer, what is your writing schedule like?
So I'm just starting this like independent writer phase. I mean, up until last week, it was just like writing my book full time. So I quit Bloomberg on in January. The time to go back to like reporting full time was coming, because Bloomberg gave me book leave, so they gave me some time to write my book. But it was just a few months. So I decided I wanted to focus full time on making the book the best that it could be. Also, after 8 years at Bloomberg, it felt I had already completed that stage in my life, and that I was ready to do something else. I've been interested in writing for magazines and just like expanding the types of stories that I write for a long time. So I thought, this is the right moment to do that. I have a book to finish, and I'm just like excited to be my own boss now. So yeah, so I quit in January, and had been like really writing all day, almost every day, like from then till now. And so now I finally have more time to actually get back to news writing. So I'm, getting in touch with sources, and just starting to come up with story ideas and see how that process goes. But um, I don't know. I expect it'll be pitching shorter stories and writing those, and at the same time working on longer stories, and be like doing a combination. I'll also have continue to spend time on my book, obviously. So I've been planning on like dividing my week, maybe like 2 days on my book and 3 days on news writing. That's like what I'm thinking right now, but I'll have to see, how it goes when I'm actually, writing.
Isn't it Nathaniel Popper who wrote the digital gold book on Bitcoin, and now he's writing for the New York Times, and he does the, I mean, I don't really follow him, but I remember reading an article of his, one of these long form articles, which isn't really news reporting, but well, it kind of is, but it isn't like the daily news reporting, right? Is that something that you would do?
Yeah, that's what I'm most interested in doing. Like, it's fun to break news. So I do like kind of the more like the quicker turnaround of stories. But yeah, I'm really interested in doing more long form features, and doing stories that will actually stick around. That people will be able to read in a year from now and they won't be stale.
Inisimo asks, or user Inisimo, I hope I pronounced his name correctly. He wrote, or she wrote, I'd like to know if you dove into private blockchains in your book, and what do you think of them at the moment? Do enterprises need to adapt to current constraints? To current constraints and lack of privacy on the public chain. So do you cover private blockchains at all?
I don't get into them very much in my book. I think to me the most exciting aspect of blockchain technology is public blockchains. I think that's where the most interesting innovation is. Just blockchains secured with the incentive of cryptocurrencies, and being fully decentralized in a global network. And I think private blockchains don't have these characteristics. They're not fully decentralized. They're permissioned. They don't always, or yeah, they don't always need a cryptocurrency. So I think it'll be harder for corporations to find an actual use for a private blockchain, because I think if you're already taking the most like innovative aspect of blockchain out, which is being a fully distributed network and having this a cryptocurrency as an incentive, if you're taking those pieces out, then what's actually the use of using blockchain technology? I think there can be like niche cases where it can make sense. Like I know banks are testing it for use in their back office with mixed results. So yeah, I wouldn't like rule out that companies will use private blockchains, but for me personally, I don't think that's where the most innovation or the most interesting aspect of blockchain technology is. I think it's in the public blockchain space.
Joshua Wakefield asks, what do you currently view as the biggest hindrance to mass adoption?
I think the technology, I think it's two things. One is regulation. There's still not a lot of clarity on how these things will be regulated. So I think investors and people are usually or are a little bit afraid of buying crypto because they don't know what's going to happen, how it will be taxed, if they're gonna go to jail or something. And the legislation is also so different from country to country, so it's just like a very murky territory in the regulation aspect. And I think the second big issue is how hard it is to use. It's still a very clunky technology. It's hard. I think there's a lot of work to be done in the user interface space. It needs to get to a point where it's just like using any other app. But right now, I feel like you need to go through so many steps, and it's you have to wait a long time for things to actually work. And yeah, I think I think regulation and just like ease of use are the two main things.
It's actually funny. I was watching a talk from Paul Brody, who's the head of blockchain development at EY at Ernst and Young, and he said in his conversation, so they've developed this protocol or this set of protocols called Nightfall to improve privacy for enterprises transacting on the public blockchain and on Ethereum mainnet. And he basically said somewhere in his talk, he's like, one of the benefits of working with EY is knowing that you will not go to jail, that everything is regulated. And he actually went a little bit deeper into that topic, which I thought, as an end user, you don't really think about that, but as an enterprise, you have all these regulatory checks that you have to like cross out. It's like, okay, will we go to jail? Yes or no? Which is a funny thing to think about, or a funny thing to forget, or to find out too late.
Yeah, I mean, for now, all the major regulatory actions have been on founders of crypto companies and founders of ICOs, and some people have actually gone to jail for this, or have been sentenced to jail. I don't know if they've actually gone to jail, but I mean, if you already see these cases as a user, you have to be kind of, a little bit wary. If you're seeing regulators come down on this industry, and there's like such a gray area where there's no definition, I think that's holding people back, especially institutional investors and big companies that are looking to get into crypto, but maybe are being held back because there's no regulatory clarity.
User Sunflower9121, wonderful username, asks, what do you think how the blockchain will fit into our lives in 10 years?
In 10 years, I think I think blockchain will have an important, let me think. I think the first industry blockchain technology will disrupt or will conquer is the financial industry. I think we're seeing it with DeFi. It's such an interesting movement that's going on. I think it's so exciting to see all these different platforms and this whole ecosystem just like building a whole new financial system from the ground up. And it's moving really quickly. So I think it'll continue to develop. And in 10 years, I wouldn't be surprised. I don't think DeFi is going to replace banks, but I think you'll have your, like traditional bank account, but also your DeFi accounts, and they will, users will use both. Maybe traditional finance will adopt some aspects of blockchain technology, but I think it'll be hard for them to do that because they have such huge legacy systems in place that I think these smaller startups will be a lot more nimble to adopt this technology. So I think it'll be I think we'll see in 10 years, blockchain technology will be really challenging the traditional financial system. And I think from there on, the same thing will start to happen with many different industries too. I do think in the long run, blockchain technology and cryptocurrencies are here to stay. It's just such a groundbreaking technology that allows people to do things that they just couldn't do before, and bring so much value to people that it's the genie's out of the bottle, and nobody will be able to stop this transformation. But I think I don't know how long it will take. If in 10 years, like every industry will be disrupted, but I think the biggest chance will be for the financial industry to be challenged by this new world.
It's interesting to see how a place like Argentina or similar or people in similar circumstances, how they might use something like DAI, which is completely decentralized, which doesn't have the volatility of any other cryptocurrency, but it has all the benefits. And to see how economies or companies will build an economy around those protocols. It's really, I mean, that's what I would say is, or what I would add to what you said is so exciting to see how that whole space is evolving and how quickly it's evolving.
Yeah. No, I think the introduction of a stable, decentralized cryptocurrency has been key, and it's why DAI has become this huge backbone for DeFi. It's been really interesting to see, and yeah, I think a stable currency is really necessary for these systems to really thrive.
User Labraf, and these are the very fun questions, asks, give a 95% confidence interval for what, when you would take a 120 bet against, for what ETH's price in dollar will be, well, this question is phrased a little bit different, a little bit complicated. The question is, what's ETH's price in dollars at the end of 2022?
I don't like giving price predictions, especially as a journalist. But I mean, from what I've said, you can tell I'm obviously bullish on the space. I don't know if Ether will. I mean, if I think that the DeFi space will continue to thrive, you need Ether to run these programs, so there will be demand for Ether. Should be. I hope by now it's already ETH 2.0. We'll see. Hopefully, they launch soon. So yeah, I don't know. I don't want to give a number, but unless Ethereum is replaced with a challenger smart contract platform, I'm pretty bullish on Ether, and yeah, there should be demand.
How many books would you like to have sold by the end of 2022?
Millions.
I also, now that we were talking about books, I also had a question which I posted, which is, what book has had the biggest impact on you?
I think it would have to be Truman's Capote in Cold Blood. That's the first. I think it was the first nonfiction novel that I read. Sorry. And yeah, I remember when I read it, it's like, okay, so I've obviously always loved to read, and I up until that point I had only been reading fiction, but that book was written by a journalist, and it read like a fiction novel with all the elements that make fiction novels exciting, but it was actually a true story. So after finishing that book, I was for sure that was the kind of writing I wanted to do. So yeah, I think it made a huge impact on me. Like I had this idea very very like early on that for me, like, real life is so interesting that you don't really need to create things outside of it to tell an interesting story. And if you can tell this story using all the like fun elements of like fiction writing, that's like a killer combination. So that's what I'm doing right now.
Sounds like you like Michael Lewis as well.
Yes, I love Michael Lewis. I think the like second biggest influence on me are his books for sure.
Have you ever seen, there's the 92 Y Street, they host conversations, and there's one interview, well, Michael Lewis is being interviewed by Malcolm Gladwell.
Oh wow.
And you should definitely, it's on YouTube. If you just if you just search for Michael Lewis and Malcolm Gladwell, you'll find it. And it was a talk given, or an interview done after he had published The Undoing Project, his latest book, which I also highly enjoyed. But that conversation between the two of them, you can obviously tell that they're friends and they know each other, and they're two of my favorite writers.
Yeah, same.
It was real funny. So yeah, I recommend you and anyone listening to this to check that interview. It's like an hour. It's like an hour long, and I put it on and I'm just smiling the whole time.
Oh, that's awesome.
wrapping up, I would like to ask you, like, what do I have to do, or what does the Ethereum community, and I'm not speaking for them, but what do we have to do to get some signed copies of your book once that it's released? I would actually love to give away, like, so next year, in about a year, like, give them away to some community members. Like, how do we get a hold of some signed copies?
Well, I mean, all I can say for now is just like get in touch with me. I don't know what the process will be like, actually. Like I said, like I'm really new to this writing process. But yeah, I mean, I would love to distribute this book as widely as possible. It's for a broad audience. It's just a fun story on how Ethereum got created, and I think it'll be good for anyone in the crypto and Ethereum community to read. So yeah, just like let's keep in touch, and I'll see how to make that happen.
All right. That's something I've been thinking about, and I would really love to give some away, and then if you go on, if the book goes on to sell the millions of copies that you mentioned earlier, it would be nice to be an early supporter, giving away
Yeah,
some copies to community members.
awesome.
All right. I think I covered everything I wanted to talk about. I noticed during the interview that I was recording on the wrong microphone, so I hope the sound quality was okay. But I actually asked everything I wanted to ask. Is there anything you would like to add, or anything that we haven't spoken about that you're excited about, or just anything that comes to mind?
Let's see. I'm thinking about launching a DeFi newsletter. So that should be. I'm doing like tests now on like what works and what doesn't, but it should be out. I want it to be out like in early July. So keep an eye out for that. I'm excited, really excited with that project. And
Does it have a name already, or a website, or is it still?
It's it's on Substack. It's called The Defiant. There are no posts there yet, because I'm doing it like offline, the test. But I should start publishing really soon. So yeah.
Will that be like a daily, weekly newsletter, monthly? What do you aim at?
Yeah, shooting for daily.
All right, all right. That's
Yeah.
that's exciting.
Yeah. No, like I said, I'm really excited with DeFi, and I don't think there's enough coverage on this. So stepping in.
Camila, where should people follow you, or where should they learn more about you?
Twitter, I think, is the best place. I'm at Camila Russo, CAMIRUSSO.
Okay, great. Then thank you very much for coming on, and let's see how the book ends up performing. I will be happy. I would love to have to be one of the early supporters and read it, and then let's see where we end up in 2022.
Yeah, let's see. We'll do another interview then.
All right, great. Thank you very much. Enjoy your day, and have a wonderful period there working on the things you're working on. I think it's quite exciting.
Thanks so much. Looking forward to all of it.
See ya.
Bye.